Actually, I must say the surf looked pretty good this morning, but I thought maybe I should prepare this instead of going for a surf. Not that I get to do it very often anymore. Great to see so many of you here. It's really exciting to see that there's so much interest in where Fremantle is and where we're going, and I hope that today will be a really stimulating look at some of the things that we've been working on over the past few months and years. This is really a chance as well for the city to start to respond to some of the key issues that have been brought up by the previous Leaders Luncheons. Many of you would have been at David Shetliff's early one in March on retailing in Fremantle. Then Lena and Ray, who in May talked about the drivers of the activity centre here in development here in the Fremantle CBD. Then of course most recently Stuart Hicks, who gave the very interesting presentations on the rings that bind us, and each of these today really does form an important part of what I'll be presenting to you today, because in many ways this is a chance for us to respond, give you an update as to where we're up to, and also talk about where we go to from here. There'll also be an announcement of a new initiative towards the end, but I'll let you know what that is when I get to it. So, as I said, this is our chance for about revitalising Fremantle, how the city responds. I just found the pointer, that's going to make things easier. I guess the background is one that you'll be all very familiar with. For those of you who have heard myself and many others over the past few years to really talk about the fundamental challenges that the Fremantle economy is facing. And I don't want to paint simply a negative picture, because I think it's actually much more diverse than that. But there's no doubt been some significant trends, and those broad trends, I would say, have, if they were to be left roll out in a way that wasn't that didn't seek change from the city and other players, we would see Fremantle would continue to decline as a regional centre. Retail floor space, as you can see, there's been a 20 to 25,000 square metre drop in retail floor space over the last couple of decades. And there's been, of course, some major changes in port industries that are in town and around storage and distribution and those kinds of things. But there's some good news stuff as well. I think we've clearly got a growing education sector, growing in terms of fashion, in terms of other forms of retail, have been thriving, entertainment and the like. But there's a real concern, I think, from many, including the city and the council, that as an economic centre, we were losing our status as a regional centre, and ultimately losing our status as Perth's second city. So the council and myself, shortly after we were elected, we got to work, put together our strategic plan with that core vision that we want Fremantle to be recognised as a unique city of culture and economic significance. And I think that really underpins everything that we're doing. And economic capacity is absolutely key to that, obviously. So a few kind of goals come out of that, and this really links into broader state planning as well. Directions 2031 is the key document that has influenced a lot of our thinking and some of the targets that it set. Fremantle wants to be a primary regional centre, as I said before, the second city behind the city of Perth. And to do that, we need to actually make sure that we get more people living and working and shopping and playing in Fremantle. In the CBD, we're looking at 15,000 extra dwellings. If you take the whole of the city of Fremantle boundaries, our population has been pretty stagnant, kind of fluctuating between about 25 to 28,000 people over the last few decades. The plan is by 2031 to increase that to about 35,000 people and an extra, I think the targets set by this document were 3,500 new dwellings. The council came back and said to state government, actually we're going to beat that, and our target is 4,500 new dwellings in Fremantle. More retail floor space and more A-grade office space. There's a real lack of quality office space within Fremantle, and we want to see that is actually going to be absolutely key about having quality jobs here, as well as a great place to live. Underlying the strategic plan, we had a whole great range of working groups. I'm going to talk about two of those today, and the first of those is the economic development strategy that came from the Economic Development Working Group, and many of those members are here today, and thanks again for the group that put in that extremely hard work to come up with a fantastic, succinct, doable plan that we're rolling out at the moment that really captures how we're going to change this city over the next 20 years. as I said, there was a decline over probably 20 years or more. But I actually think we're going to turn this city around quicker than 20 years. In fact, we're going to see some pretty, as you'll see today, some pretty substantial changes rolling out. But it is a process, and some of those things will take longer than others. Now, apologies for those of you who've seen this before. I must say I don't think I can barely watch this video again as good as it is. And Linda, who's here, I saw Linda before somewhere. It's a fantastic video, but I think it's really useful, especially for those of you who haven't seen it. And it is on our website, and to really capture where some of the thinking is on Fremantle and some of the things that we've been doing. So let me just see if I can make the technology work.
Fremantle always has been Perth's second city. Until recently, we had that sense of it getting lost amongst a myriad of other activity centres. And this is Fremantle's great opportunity to restate itself as Perth's second city, to build on that social and economic heritage of a place where you can live and work and shop all in one place. We've got the great built heritage, and we need to make sure we bring our economic and social heritage with us as well.
We've got in this city 4 wonderfully dense, intense activity centres, and they're the envy of every town and every city in Australia. One of them is, of course, the West End, a wonderful, preserved 19th century port city, the equal of any in the world. The second one is the port itself. It is a moving, viable, economic generator of interest all the time. And the waterfront, Victoria Quay, can, I think, become much more part of the city. We've got the entertainment and leisure centre of the city, the Cappuccino Strip, football ground, the Esplanade, the fishing boat harbour, an intense area of attraction day and night, 7 days a week. And finally, we've got our seafront from the South Mole right through to South Beach, a wonderfully historic, intense, active part of West Australia's coast. The one, of course, that I haven't mentioned yet is the 5th activity circle, which doesn't, in my view, work so well right now, and that's our central city, the CBD, the retail, commercial, residential centre of the city. We have certainly a set of economic imperatives as far as the future of the city is concerned. And it's a quite narrow window of opportunity, I think, for us to turn some of the economic conditions in our central city around. I suggest it's no more than about 2 years through which we need to move as a city to re-establish together the retail, residential and commercial activities of our centre. If that continues to fade away, then the other 4 activity centres will in turn struggle because they will miss the ring that holds them all together.
Brad Pettitt was elected mayor on a platform of green redevelopment and won with a significant majority in late 2009.
New council was elected about 20 months ago, and one of the key focuses was around economic development, revitalising the city, not just as a tourist centre, but as a real place. But in doing so in a way that really honours our past, but embraces the future of Fremantle as a vibrant economic centre. And for me, that's what's really exciting, and that is the absolute focus of this council.
Within 6 months, the new council released its strategic plan, with economic development as its key priority, and proceeded to commission a retail model plan.
Well, first and foremost is there's a lack of people in Fremantle, particularly from a retail perspective. That has to be fixed in 3 ways, really. One is to add some more office space and residential units within particularly the central part of Fremantle. Secondly, there needs to be much better management, marketing and coordination of the retail offer that's already here. And thirdly, there needs to be additional retail space put in to cope with increased people that finish up living here.
During the same period, the city also commissioned a report into drivers of activity in the city centre.
The report revealed there's enormous goodwill and enthusiasm in the development community about doing business in Fremantle. Unfortunately, the report also revealed that over the last 20 years or so, a perception has taken hold in the development community that Fremantle is opposed to development and investment in the city at all costs.
Being a Fremantle lad from way back, it was quite interesting because Fremantle had always been thought of as that second CBD to Perth. What the study revealed was, in fact, it was very much losing that position, and that is it still has many of the iconic things that you relate with Fremantle in terms of particularly the entertainment and the cultural components. But where I suppose it was losing ground, so to speak, was things like the retail offer. It doesn't have that full retail offer, and the question is how long will it even sustain what it has now? So one of the things we also did for Fremantle was looking at office accommodation, and the reality is that there is only so much suburban office space that can happen. So what you need to do is you need to make sure that you're competitive.
Based on these reports, the city adopted its economic development strategy in April this year.
One of the things that the strategy did was set some targets for City Central, which is 1,500 additional dwellings, 70,000 square metres of A-grade commercial office accommodation and 20,000 square metres of retail floor space. In order to achieve those targets, we need to identify height limits in the city that are realistic, that are commercially viable, and also provide for those targets.
There are three ways the Council is achieving these goals. The first is through scheme amendments. The East End scheme amendment was recently gazetted and is an example of the Council's resolve.
The East End was previously zoned just 3 stories, and we'll expect to see major new developments of 5, 6, 7, 8 stories happen throughout that area. The scheme amendments are absolutely important. We really haven't seen any major quality developments in Fremantle for many decades, actually, because none of the right incentives have been there for the landowners. So what we've gone through and said to landowners is, well, we'll give you extra height, extra bulk, other development bonuses in exchange for getting new development and getting high quality new development in the city centre. What we're going to be doing instead is taking those ugly parts of Freo, those 60s and 70s buildings that no one loves, in fact most people hate, from the Myer building to the Target building and the Woolstore shopping centre, and actually getting those redeveloped, rezoning those from 2 to 4 stories, which they're currently zoned, up to 5, 6, 7 to encourage quality new development, to get new residents, new office space, new retail into those areas, and actually, and in that way, revitalise Fremantle as a primary regional centre.
The second way the Council is revitalising the city centre is through developing council properties and working in partnership with landowners.
One of the things we're working really hard with the development industry on is developing our own properties, getting really good development plans up for our own properties to try and increase that commercial space and retail space and residential space. We own this building, Queensgate. We own the Queensgate car park, the Spices site. We own Freehold, the office site. We own a 5,000 square metre site over in Point Street. We're talking to the development industry about all of those sites, about facilitating development and working with government to actually help us do that.
The third way is through bringing all the planning agencies together and creating a Fremantle Union.
There are other planning agencies in addition to the city who we need to work with very closely. We need to work with the port, of course, that we need to break down any semblance of a barbed wire between the port operation on the one hand and the city on the other. We need to work with the planning department and the WAPC because their powers and responsibilities in relation to the overall metropolitan region greatly affect how ours goes in the future. And finally, we need to work with the PTA, Transperth, Department of Transport, because we have a railway station at our heart, which is still, in my view, not recognised as much as it needs to be, that it sits right now in a sea of bitumen and car parks. And that provides the great challenge, but also, I think, the great opportunity as we come together as a community and as the agencies work together to ensure that our central city progresses the way it needs to.
We are a regional city and we serve a catchment much greater than Fremantle. It is our intent to regain our status as a primary centre and to once again be Perth's second city.
When I went back, some of my friends were saying, oh, you're going to come back to Europe and live here. And I guess what I kept saying to them is that Fremantle has got so much potential to develop, and I'm excited to be here to watch that. The exciting thing is, since I've been here, we've had the election, we've got a new mayor, he's young, for me what's really important, he's in the field of sustainability, and you can see what he's trying to do to the city as well. So I've been advocating that cities in general in Australia really do need to increase their density, but I guess the biggest thing that you come up against is people's fear of, oh no, density means high rise and it means, 50 stories Shanghai style, and it can just mean 5 or 6 stories. I think it can be really beautiful. I mean, that's what you see all through Europe as well, and then you can start to incorporate little courtyards within those areas and increase, have more public space.
The most exciting thing about it is that there have been a few key changes that have come about, and I think that the time is right. Let's sort of talk about when all the planets align. I think that the planets are aligning to perhaps bring about some change.
The economic conditions in WA now are just perfect for Fremantle to really jump in and take advantage of those benefits.
4 agencies working together within a community that trusts and works with them, we can move the city any place we want to take it.
So I think that provides a really, hopefully, a good summary of where the city's at and some of our thinking. We don't want to watch it again. All right, very good. So what I want to talk about now is some of the things that we have, some of the initiatives that we have implemented and some of the progress that we've made, again, in response to some of those earlier Leaders Luncheons. You'd be aware that the East End scheme amendment, so the East End's when, for those of you who came from the north, when you drove over the bridge and came through the car yards, that's the East End, basically from the car yards all the way down to Princess May Park. Now that scheme amendment, which as I talked about in the video, is now gazetted. And we look forward to seeing the owners in that area convert their car yards and the like into what's going to be a primarily residential area. We expect to see 2,000 to 3,000 more people living in that area above commercial uses on some of the ground floors. So again, a really exciting way of getting more people living and working and supporting the CBD of Fremantle. As well, another key way, and I think the city's shown some great leadership on this and a really innovative approach, is through the Small Dwellings Scheme Amendment, where the first local government actually embed within our scheme a as-of-right approach to having be able to build a small dwelling on the back of your house. Australia is extremely good at building very large houses with very few people in them, and that, of course, can't be a sustainable way forward. And I think what this offers is much greater flexibility and getting that diversity of population back within Fremantle. And we expect up to 5,000 properties could be developed that way, and you could see the population benefits as well as the affordability and diversity benefits of that. Point Street, that we've just updated our development guidelines for that precinct. This is a council-owned property where the Point Street car park is and the Port Cinema adjacent to Princess May Park. And so now that process will be ready to go to the next stage in terms of going through a tendering process around landowners of that site. So we're seeing that progress. And also quite an innovative approach coming from our economic and development team around a really cooperative approach to marketing. And I think this for me is, I hope that you're starting to get a sense of this, is about the way we want to be working as a city, where we're really working with key stakeholders like yourselves in a really cooperative manner to actually, I think there's a real consensus around where we need to go, and it's about working together to do that. And this is a really nice example of that. And there was the East Coast advertising campaign that many of you might have heard about, which had more than 10,000 entries around the Find Yourself in Fremantle, and that was drawn recently, and we've got some very happy winners from Sydney, I think, who are going to be coming over. And another quick 30-second ad.
You might not bench 140 kilos or have 6 All-Australian Guernseys. You might not even play football, but you can always find yourself in Fremantle.
Stay in style. Shop in the West End. Fun at Fishing Boat Harbour. Experience Rottnest Island.
And take home a diamond necklace from Creations. Win a holiday for 4 people worth over $30,000 flying Qantas business class to Fremantle. So head to findyourselfinfremantle.com to enter, and we'll see you here.
And I think it's a great way of promoting ourselves to the rest of Australia and in a way that's really in cooperation with Fremantle businesses. In addition to that, we recently purchased back in June the visitor centre, which actually was privately owned until then, and that's enabling us to properly embed that into the way we market the city. It's open more days, it's going to be open public holidays and on the weekends now, and we'll start to be a proper visitor centre, which is really exciting for the city as well. So we'll start to see that roll out. And of course, the Maya application, that was passed only a couple of weeks ago by the Planning Services Committee, and of a $30 million revamp of that building, and which I think will be, well, I know when that happens, it's going to be a really important catalyst for redevelopment across the whole city. So there's some of the things that have happened, and I guess there's also a few other things that are in train and are equally important. And as the video talked about quite well, the Fremantle Union is probably the most important one of those. Having the agreement of the key government agencies who are in the city, including Fremantle Ports, and Chris Leadhater from Fremantle Ports is here, and along with the Public Transport Authority, along with the Department of Planning, the WAPC, Department of Transport, and of course the city, all working together on those key projects that we can't do by ourselves because there's land, some different departments own different bits of land, and it's only through that cooperative approach, working together, that we can actually make this happen. So that's really exciting. The Stuart Hicks is also here, and who you would have seen in the video, and who gave the previous Leaders Luncheon, and Stuart's the independent chair of that, and it's very exciting for us to have Stuart involved in that process. For those of you who don't know, Stuart's heads up the East Perth Redevelopment Authority and also the waterfront, the City of Perth waterfront master planning for that area as well. So Stuart's expertise and the fact that he's also a Fremantle boy is really important. So he'll be working with myself and Andrew Sullivan and Josh Wilson from the City of Fremantle, the councillors, and also the CEO, Graham McKenzie, along with Graham Prattley, who's the chair of the WAPC, Eric Lumsden, who's the Director General of Department of Planning, Rhys Waldock, who's the Director General of Transport, and as I said before, Chris Leadhater, who's the CEO of the Fremantle Port Authority. That'll be the board of the Fremantle Union. And we are underway focusing on this is Stuart's term, these big bangers, these key projects that we need to get going. Again, Stuart in the video talked about that railway station precinct, and I think everyone agrees, fantastic railway station. The work the PTA's done on that recently is stunning, but it kind of sits by itself, surrounded by lots of bitumen, and it's a fantastic opportunity to really use that space and connect it with the city, and use that redevelopment as a way of connecting the water, connecting the port back in with cities, with the centre of the city. So that'll be the first one. The other key project is around King Square. Again, an area really important to Fremantle, and I'll talk about this a bit more in a minute, but which needs some comprehensive and major redevelopment around it. So the community reference group is also going to be a group that we're going to be setting up. It's going to sit alongside the union as a way of a way of us bouncing ideas off our community. So having key members from key Fremantle groups, businesses, industry, and the like will actually be a really important way of us engaging with our community. And in the longer term approach of the union will actually be to do the structure plan for the whole city. And that, of course, includes some of the key things around transport, around parking, the $1 million question in Fremantle that I probably get more emails about than anything else, and actually starting to integrate all those into the broader planning that actually will complement some of the scheme amendments. And the scheme amendment part 2 is now underway. So the East End, we've put that away. That's the outer East End is now gazetted, and so we're focusing our energies on a second scheme amendment. And this area sits between the East End and the important West End. Now, the West End certainly hasn't been forgotten. We've actually got a new working group that's got community members on it that's actually looking at better protecting the West End, giving that a state heritage listing, and actually providing and updating some of the policies and protections around that. Because the city's very clear, we're not trying to do major developments in heritage areas. It's what makes us really special as a city, and we don't need to do that. I mean, in many ways, the irony is we've got a whole bunch of areas, as we talked about in the video, that look pretty shabby and pretty run down and don't have any heritage value at all. And they're the areas that are actually where we have here, which is the city centre, the area outlined in front of you. So the scheme amendment actually looks at a couple of key sites. The ones that are outlined there in pink, and really around King Square as the Target building, Westgate Mall, Coke and Gas site, the Coles building, my building, and those kinds of sites, all really capable of actually having some great new developments on them that will really add to the city as a whole. So, and you get a sense there, so looking across from the West End and to the areas which we're going to be increasing the heights on those sites. And I think this is the part of Fremantle, as Stuart Hicks said in the last Leaders Luncheon, it's the ring that's not working. It's that part of Fremantle that has so much potential, but unfortunately at the moment just doesn't have the development incentives there to actually make it work. And if we are going to get 70,000 extra square metres of A-grade office space, an extra 20,000 square metres of retail floor space, and we are going to get several thousand more people living in Fremantle, in fact, there's only about 800 odd people living in the centre of Fremantle at the moment, and we want to quadruple that to making sure we have far more people activating Fremantle 7 days a week, not just on the weekends. So in addition to some of the base heights will be increasing, there will be also some discretionary heights on a couple of those sites. And I think there's probably been a fair bit of press around how we're going to do that, but I think this is actually important. This is about getting key quality development outcomes. And that's always been the fear in Fremantle, is that by always trying to obsess around height, we've almost often forgotten about the question pardon me, about the question of how we get quality development. So, and this is key. We've got a design advisory committee now. There's a picture there of Geoffrey London, who's a Victorian state government architect and who's the chair of that committee. An independent committee of council that advises council, making sure that developments are of a high quality. And for the discretionary height to happen, it needs a tick from this independent committee. It also needs to make sure it doesn't impact on surrounding open spaces. And of course, it's got to make sure that it actually provides very strong leadership in terms of environmentally sustainable design. And we want this to be the heritage of this century, of the 21st century, that in 100 years' time, when our grandkids look back on it and they say, isn't that a great precinct? And that those buildings are still there, not just... So building quality is absolutely key. So you can get a sense here, so this is the current building height limits, really in that 4 stories with a fifth setback. And then these are the basic... the scheme will increase if it's out for advertising. It's about to go out for advertising early October, actually, when the advertising officially starts. It's currently with the Department of Environment. And then it will... These are the base heights, so it increases, and then there's, on top of that, further discretionary heights if those very high standards are met. So I hope that's visible to you there, and you get a real sense of how that will work. And, I mean, it is a very substantial increase in what we've previously planned. But it's not high-rise, and I think as Vanessa nicely put in that video, we're not talking Perth steel and glass skyscrapers here, we're talking a particular style. Now, I'm just going to give you an example here. I want to just preface this by saying this is not a DA that's currently before council. This is something we're working with the architects and the owners. E.g. Property own the Wool Stores site. It's a huge site. It's about 1.6 hectares, 16,000 square metre site. So it's a very important site about how and so we're doing some early preliminary work on that. And I just wanted to share some of that with you because it will give a bit of sense about some of the built form that we're thinking might emerge out of this. So the architects have really started with this idea of what a dense European city looks like, and that's our model. That idea that you have that range of heights between 6 and 9 stories, maybe with smaller other bits jutting above it, and that roofscape. It's still human scale. It still has that, but it also has great urban spaces around it as well. And you can see, so the preliminary design actually takes on some of those classic European forms across that whole block, and actually with having piazzas within it, as well as and different roof forms and those kinds of things. And it's a really modern interpretation of that as you go forward, and you get a bit of a sense of how that might look there. And as I say, this is just early ideas and working with the architects about how we do this, but it gives you a sense, I think, of some of the way that we hope the this new kind of built form will play out in this new part of Fremantle. It's not going to be like it's not going to be like Perth CBD, and it's not going to be like the West End. It's actually going to have its own precinct with its own form, and I think that's a really exciting idea about how we start to do that. There's a number of other sites, just to give you a sense of the ones that are part of this scheme amendment: the Coke and Gas site, the Westgate Mall, both the Myer and the Queensgate building. I think as I go through these, I get the sense that probably no one's going to be very sad to see fundamental changes to these sites. I have had 2 emails of people who are sad the Myer building will change, but only 2. I think there's probably not very many people, and even our town hall centre, I think, is an area that I think could do us some work. And the Spices site's the site next to the Fremantle Markets. Is again a car park that the City of Fremantle owns that I think could be much better used. So there's a bit of a snap of the scheme amendments. There's also been some very exciting work actually done by the economic development team around business improvement districts. Now this is an idea that has come out of the economic development strategy and is a very exciting idea from that working group. And again, it's about that cooperative model, about how we work with you and actually handing back power, handing back decision making to key people in our community to say, what do you want to invest in? What kind of city do you want to make, and how do you want to make sure those resources happen? So, and there's some fantastic examples from around the world, from Boston to Wimbledon, Dublin, and others. I actually looked at one in New York when I was there last year. And again, you actually really saw there how businesses got together and they said, we want to make these improvements to our district. This street's not working. Let's put out new bins. Let's put out new lighting. In fact, the one in New York actually had public toilets, but with a gentleman who would greet you and had fresh flowers in the public toilets, because that was actually their way of saying that's what it needed to attract people into that area to shop, that they knew that there was clean and usable public toilets in the area. One of the most important and the biggest ones bids is the one in the new West End company in London. And what's amazing as you read all the range of literature around bids is how the overwhelming evidence is how they've been a success story, where you've actually got people coming back into town because it's the businesses who know what their shoppers want, who know what they need, and they're the ones who are making the decisions around how the money is spent in their area. So, I mean, and security and safety is a very big part of that. And for example, 61% reduction in smash and grabs since 2008 was one of the outcomes of that new West End Company London bid. And 82% of shoppers believe the West End is cleaner. 15,000 miles of pavement were washed. 750,000 visitors assisted by red caps, by people actually advising people around that district, etc. You get a real sense of how you can actually get some really positive outcomes. And that's a very big bid in London, but the one in Civic, which is in the main centre of Canberra, also has a bid where they've, again, worked in partnership, got the International Film Festival in there, joint marketing initiatives as well, and again, seeing a really positive feedback from businesses in that area. Perhaps the most overwhelming, and I just want to read you one quote, is around the British bids when they did a study of those, where it said that the value and positive impact of bids is clearly recognised by business communities around the country and demonstrated in particular by a 100% success rate on the 16 renewal ballots to date. So 100% of those have actually voted to keep the bid going. So I think, and we're actually, City of Fremantle's the first to do this in WA that I'm aware of. In fact, Simon O'Brien, the Minister for Finance, actually gave me a call last week and said, I'm really interested in this, can you send me some more information, because I'd like to see how we can start to roll this out around other parts of the state. So I think, again, a really great initiative, and you can get a sense of there's a lot happening, and I guess there's also a lot more to do. So I wanted to share with you now around some of the key things that we will be focusing on over the next little while. And one of these is, I guess, the announcement that I wanted to make today, and it is it's a big project for the city. As I indicated earlier, when we were talking about the big bangers that we needed to work on, the second one of those was around King Square. Where King Square, I think everyone would agree, is a very important part of Fremantle, but one that really probably hasn't worked as well as it could have. And has that real sense of, I think, we've got in the habit of kind of putting our head down and running through it as we go somewhere else rather than actually be part of our square. Today, I would like to announce that we will be planning to work with Serona Capital, who are the new owners of the Myer building, to do a integrated King Square precinct redevelopment. And Matthew McNeely is here from Serona. And this, because what that offers, we could just do the Myer redevelopment as you saw the pictures of it. We could just do that and it could sit by itself next to a pretty uninspiring Queensgate building and a pretty uninspiring town hall centre and car park and the like. Or we could actually take this opportunity where we're going to see a $30 million redevelopment there anyway, to actually redevelop that whole precinct. Instead of, probably the Myer executives won't mind me saying, one of them said to me, he said, we don't want to do this redevelopment and then just be a shiny new Myer in kind of a drab precinct. And that's totally fair enough. And we don't want that either. And this is actually an opportunity to have a shiny new Myer in a shiny new precinct that actually has much better facilities, much better public spaces and the like. So, as King Square is absolutely central to our city and to our city's redevelopment, and this new project and this new partnership will be absolutely key to make sure that happens successfully. So the process around that, this is just some quick snaps around King Square's changed a lot. I mean, in fact, I don't know if you can actually recognise it, there actually used to be all buildings in that part of the triangle, and St John's Church triangle was the only bit of parkland and the road actually went through. And then in the 1960s, there was a very attractive car park, whereas at the back of the new council building. So, I mean, there's been many incarnations of that. And look, I want to be really clear, we haven't made any decisions yet on what it's going to look like. This is early stages, and we'll be certainly engaging with you all about how you think King Square can best be revitalised. And but I think right now it's an okay part of town, but it has so much potential and could be so much better. So later this month, an MOU between Serona Capital and the City of Fremantle will be coming to the council meeting on the 29th and for consideration. Assuming that council agrees to that MOU and that's signed, then there will be a strong and robust community engagement with each of you and our broader community around how we can best revitalise King Square with the businesses around that area, with the broader residents, with the broader businesses and industry and the like. And then only after then we'll get to the planning and design issues. Assuming that all works and we get a sense of the scope of that project, then we'd go to the next stage to a heads of agreement after that. So this is early stages, but it's a very exciting first step on a revitalisation of that whole precinct. I hope what you've got a sense of today is a lot's happened, a lot's happening, and there's a lot still to come. And there is that real sense of a lot of balls in the air, and I think we're doing a pretty good job of making sure that they're all we're juggling them in a way that actually is really getting that sense of Fremantle moving in the right direction. I don't think it is an exaggeration to say what we're proposing here is the biggest urban renewal project in Fremantle since the America's Cup. And I think it's time, and I think it is a really key time for us to do that. And I think there is also a fantastic consensus in the community that we're at that point where we're kind of ready to do this and we're ready to understand about how we do this together. So I really appreciate your time today and for listening, and I look forward to any questions that you might have. Oh, okay. Yes, I forgot. This is Andrew Eastick kindly said I should share. It's just all about brightening up Fremantle, and Fremantle having a bright future. And this is a concept of some of the lights that will be going in the city centre before Christmas this year. So thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Brad. Lots of exciting new concepts there, and I'm sure you've got lots of questions with probably limited time to ask. Now, if you just want to ask a question, put your hand up, and we've got a portable microphone here, courtesy of Brian Smith from the Chamber. So pop your hand up, Brian will come over to you, just identify yourself and ask away. Okay, who's going to be first? Don't be shy, because this is what always happens. With 30 seconds to go, we get 100 hands up. Who's going to be first? Sound like an auctioneer here, don't I? No questions? Everybody's happy with everything that Brad's got to say? Okay, here we go.
I better kick things off, I think. Yes, on behalf of the church, which is a key player in the centre of King Square and so on, we've sort of sat and watched this process for many years. What sort of time frame are we working on for some of these property developments? Because the church owns bits of Queen Street and so on, and we're sitting there wondering what sort of time frame we should be letting out for.
It's a very good question. It's the question. Well, with the joint project around King Square, the MOU that I understand is going to be coming to council will be for a 9-month process around the planning and consultation and those kinds of things. Which will take us to the 31st of June, 30th of June next year. Ultimately, Myer, I must say, the stories of Myer are probably a little bit overstated about Myer. I don't believe these things until I see them sign on a dotted line, but it is certainly encouraging, and the conversations with Myer have been very encouraging, but I would probably say that it's not 100% locked away yet. But for Myer, obviously don't want to stay in a building in its current form, and we don't want them to stay in a building in that form either, and Serona Capital don't want to see that building stay in its form either. So that development is going to happen. That DA has been signed off, you'd think, in the next year or two. So we would love, and the church is a really important property owner on Queen Street, along with a couple of other owners, and that's a key precinct. In many ways, that Queen Street precinct, the way that links the King Square down to the train station, and we absolutely have to get Queen Street right, because that area, this part of Fremantle, is going to be the retail heart of Fremantle, where the new offices are, where the new retail is, where many more people will be living. So making sure that the church is part of that and we can get some redevelopment on that precinct will be absolutely fantastic. And I know that David Shetliff, who gave the first Leaders Luncheon, is now employed as a consultant by the city, has been talking with you around how we start to do an integrated redevelopment there as well.
Yeah, Brad, Jared O'Brien. I'm just a little concerned about the staging of the process. I think we have to make sure before we build the retail that we've got the residential up and running. There's a lot of studies are out. If we produce more than 2 square metres or 2.2 square metres per head of population of retail space, then we know that all we're going to do is have second-rate retail and it will again close. It won't make the turnover. The occupancy cost will exceed it. I just think the most vital thing with all this is to make sure that we do the residential first and get this 28,000 people up to 35,000. Then you will drive the retail. I think if we do it the other way, we're doomed to have very secondary, ordinary results, and then we're going to get a very bad name. Can you tell me how you're going to stage it, and can you tell me how you're going to ensure that we've got the people here before we get the second stage, because that's the real key to it.
It's a good point. And I think that's why we did the East End first, because the East End is primarily residential. So that enables the developers who own those properties, and unfortunately we've got a global financial climate that's not really conducive to people putting huge amounts of money into developments at the moment, which of course is a bit challenging. So it makes staging all that more difficult. But we'd certainly like to see that East End happen straight away. And some of the developments, like the EG property one I showed you, are they're primarily residential. They've got large components of retail in them on the ground floor, but when you're talking a 9-storey development, which is what that is, you've actually got a huge scope for residential above it. And we're actually, so I guess I'd answer your question partly by saying it is all going to be happening simultaneously, because these developments are multi-layered. So they're retail on the ground floor, and they may be office above, and of course office workers are equally important. In fact, you could argue more important to retail, because they actually got people with money working in town using their lunchtime to go out and shop. But if they're not going to have office above, they're going to have retail above. So in many ways they're going to be happening in parallel. But the staging is very important, and car parking is actually a key part of that staging. What we don't want to see is Point Street will close down, Spicer site, redevelopment of the Queensgate car park. All of a sudden, then no one can actually get into Fremantle anymore. And I'm sure for those of you who drove here today, parking itself was enough of a challenge without making it too much worse. So one of the other things we are doing, we're just setting up a new working group that's actually going to be looking at where from a sustainability perspective, someone who's never been a fan of building new car parks, but we are going to need a new car park in Fremantle. And that's one of the key things that we are going to be doing, is actually making sure that's in the right location. And actually we've got a strong, legible parking regime in Fremantle, and so that's going to be another key part of the staging.
Gary Hayden from Elixir Marketing. Is there any chance that any of the new buildings can be built in the traditional Victorian or Edwardian style, or would that be cost prohibitive?
Well, it may be cost prohibitive, but I'd also argue that I actually think we don't want to do that. Because I think the danger is you actually devalue your... I mean, we have got such a fantastic heritage precinct in the West End, and we don't need to do some poor imitation of that in part of a new part of Fremantle. In fact, what I actually hope we get is innovative contemporary architecture, so you've got a very clear, different precinct that reads differently. I mean, and I always hate going to places where you feel like, where did the old part end and the new part start, and you can't quite read it. I actually want to be in a place where I understand the history and understand the layers of the city and understand that there are different precincts with a different feeling. Now, ultimately, we don't get to decide what people design. We put in height limits and we put in other kinds of planning constraints and uses and those kinds of things. The kind of architecture that comes to us will be ultimately down to the owners of those buildings. But I guess, to be blunt, mock heritage is not something that I would be encouraging in this area.
Shirley Coucher, Information Enterprises. I was just wondering, you talked about the East End and you've talked about the CBD and the West End. What about the part from Ord Street to Perry Street on High Street? There's still a two-storey limit there, and whilst there has been some approval just on the Parry level, and there's some really ugly 70s buildings in that area.
Yeah. And look, there will certainly be... I guess what we tried to do, and I think in many ways why we've... One of the reasons I think Fremantle hasn't managed to actually do a scheme amendment like this before, this is the first major scheme amendment that I'm aware of in Fremantle's history, is in the past we've always tried to bite off too much and they end up getting bogged down in a whole bunch of small ones. So we were quite clear about picking the strategic sites at the heart of the city. That doesn't mean that down the track, and once this bit's put to bed and we've got this underway, that we won't look at other scheme amendments in other parts of the city. And I think that would need to be seen on a case-by-case basis. And in fact, that part of High Street obviously is an entry to the city and I think has some real potential. But I think it's important that we make sure we don't get bogged down in trying to do too much at once and then ultimately having nothing happen, and that's why we've done it the way we have.
John Tedesco, Rottnest Island Authority, and thanks very much, Brad, for an excellent presentation. Really appreciate that. A lot of this development is going to require matching streetscaping from the city. To what extent is the city willing to devote, redirect the resources and priority to streetscaping, because it's no use having all these wonderful buildings and developments if the streetscaping is not going to match it. Yeah.
No, it's a very, very good question and a worthwhile comment, and I think for those of you who also came from the northern suburbs and tried to come down Queen Victoria Street, where the East End is, we've got a clear plan to actually see those streetscapes upgraded. So we started with Queen Victoria Street in the East End, and at the moment you'll see that there's new street trees, in fact a major redevelopment of that whole street in terms of streetscaping, because it's the public spaces really matter. There's no point having some fantastic new buildings if you don't have high quality public spaces. In fact, last night the Planning Services Committee also looked at the Percent for Art scheme, which would be something else that we're doing here in Fremantle, where new developments will be asked to contribute towards high quality public art within there, which is, I think, quite a common thing around councils now across Australia too, because that's absolutely, again, I mean, I guess my vision for this city is I want it to be where people want to come out on the street, where, it's no good simply having lots of fantastic apartments where people don't leave them. Where actually this is about vitalising the streets of Fremantle, getting people back out and about, and you need high quality public spaces to do that. So we'll absolutely be investing in those.
Brad, John Longley from the Perth 2011 World Sailing Championships. Brad, congratulations. It's just the most fantastic... having been involved with the Fremantle Chamber of Commerce and have been through all those dark years, it's so wonderful to see this great light coming over the horizon. Brad, and I don't want to be negative, how the heck are we going to sell it? I say that, we. Are we going to sell this? I mean, if we just take a single example of the Sea Lanes development that was squashed in those dark times, a wonderful development, 4 to 6 there. It was all went through council, all the approvals were happened, and yet a small, very small, vocal minority of people who wanted to try and get themselves a future political career leapt up and stopped that. And today we still have rundown warehouses in that wonderful place. Somehow, and this is the great thing of leadership, how do you get the vast majority of people who are with you, and you heard the applause as soon as I said congratulations, how do you take them with you? Because we've got to make it happen, mate, because if it doesn't happen this time, then we might as well all quit.
Yeah.
I'm not a quitter.
And as Stuart Hicks said, and I think I've heard Eric Lumsden say it as well, we've got around about 2 years to get a lot of these things in place, and I think we do. I actually think there's been a fundamental change over the last few years around attitudes in Fremantle, around not everybody. There's always going to be a very vocal and very loud minority who don't want to see a change, and I hear from them regularly. But I do think amongst the broad population there is a fundamental sense that we need to change. And I think there's a couple of things that I think we need to do well and as part of that communication. One is to be really clear, we're not going to be bulldozing heritage buildings. That's a long time ago off the agenda, and no one's contesting that anymore. So we're going to keep our heritage places, and we're going to focus our redevelopments on areas that look awful and are run down and are crap. And it's pretty hard to argue saying, well, why wouldn't you redevelop a crap area? The question of height is a fundamental issue in Fremantle, and I know people get really nervous around it. I think we've got that balance right. Look, 9 stories it's a lot bigger than anything we've done before. It's twice as high. But again, it's about quality, and I think if you can actually make the conversation much more about quality, much more about a vision around that European scale, and we're not talking about that kind of ugly glass and steel high-rise. This is actually about the kind of density we need for a sustainable city going forward. The Director of Planning, Phil St John, always reminds me of one of my favourite things is that he says, for every unit you build here is one less house you need to bulldoze out on the margins. And for Perth, as one of the most sprawled, unsustainable cities on the planet, we need to do this. And the reality is, I actually think there is a growing awareness that it's an opportunity that's not only right for Fremantle, it's right for the state, and it's actually a responsible thing to do. And it's going to make us a diverse and vibrant community. And I actually think people get that now. And I think that message is not a hard one to sell. And I think while you won't convince everybody, I don't think we have to. I just think we've got to move forward.
Thank you very, very much, Brad, and also thanks to Brian for our movable microphone. And thank you, everyone, too, for being such an attentive audience and guests. And now for the last word today, that goes to Tim Wilson, the Acting Chief Executive Officer of the Fremantle Chamber of Commerce. Tim.
I'm just going to duck in. I promised Brian I'd do something I forgot to do. For the election, there's a candidates meeting coming up on Thursday the 7th, Thursday at 7 p.m. Thursday the 29th at 7 p.m. So for those of you who, because the kind of council we get obviously makes my life a whole lot easier in terms of the kind of way that we can progress things. And we've got many good candidates running. So at the City of Fremantle's reception hall upstairs next to the council chambers from 7 o'clock on Thursday the 29th, you'll be able to meet the candidates, and I encourage you to come along. Thank you.
Ladies and gents, thank you very much for giving me the opportunity to address you. This may be the only time, but I'm here in the capacity of Acting CEO of the Fremantle Chamber of Commerce. In closing today, I would firstly thank you all for attending. Having listened to Brad, I think you'll all agree that it's an exciting time to be in Fremantle and to be part of the business community. The business forums that are held regularly to the Fremantle Chamber of Commerce are very positive towards the direction the city is taking, and they have asked me to congratulate Brad and in particular Andrew Eastick for the sterling work that is being achieved. With so much going on in the city, it's imperative that the business community has a voice and it can be heard. The Fremantle Chamber is a non-for-profit independent organisation and the largest and most proactive community organisation in Fremantle, and it's a key strategic partner of the City of Fremantle. As it's a not-for-profit organisation, it's also tax deductible, 100%, so your fees are reclaimable. Never has it been so important to be part of the Fremantle Chamber of Commerce as it is today. We act as the conduit between business and the city, and we give you, the business community, a voice. Think of the Chamber as your loudspeaker. We make sure your thoughts and concerns are communicated and fed through to the appropriate departments. I want to make the Chamber into an organisation that not only do you want to belong to, you need to belong to. So in closing, if you're not already a member, I urge you to get involved and to have your say on some exciting developments taking place in Fremantle. We have a great team at the Chamber, a team that can achieve almost anything. Look out for the latest forums and events, a copy on the table at the moment. You'll see some really good things happening. We've got some fun events, and we've got some forums, we've got some business training. We're going to sort of develop a program that will actually deliver a diploma in the end. Thank you for attending. A special thanks to the Esplanade Hotel, a superb function as always. The city's team, in particular Donna Burgess, Air team, Jackie, Jazz, Victoria and Jackie, roving Mike, Brian Smith for all the hard work, and thank you very much for making this such a special day. I leave you with one this thought: to move forward requires courage and insight and a little genius. Thank you and enjoy the rest of the day.